Let's explore more about the Builderius dynamic data and the collection element in today's video. In our last video, we took a look at how to populate a single post template as well as an archive template with dynamic data. In today's video, we'll take it a step further and see how we can create custom query loops within either our single post template or a regular page, which is not an archive template. For this tutorial, we'll be writing a little bit of code, but don't worry, it is quite easy to do and it's quite intuitive. So let's take a look. Here we are in my book reviews single post template. Let's say at the bottom, I want to add a section where I display a list of related book reviews. In the previous video, I showed you about the archive template and how Builderius can automatically detect the main query within an archive template to display the list of posts. But right now, we're not in an archive template. We are in a single post template, or maybe in a page. I want to display a list of posts from a specific custom post type. So for that, we need to use our own custom query. To create a custom query, you need to create a custom dynamic data variable, which is quite easy. I'll show you how to do that using the built-in Builderius snippets, so you don't have to write so much code. If you want to know how to write the code from scratch, I'll leave a link in the description and somewhere that's popping up in the card, where I go through step by step how to create your own data variable from scratch. So now let's go down to the bottom of the screen. You see dynamic data. It will open up the dynamic data section. I'm trying to create a dynamic data variable which will apply to only the current template. So I'll switch it from global to template level. Then I'll create a new variable. I'll call it something like related. Within that variable, we can now go ahead and add in our nested objects. Builderius already has a nice handy snippet, so I'll click on snippet plus at the top right hand corner and I'll search for my snippet. So let's say I'm trying to return just a list of posts from the post type called book reviews. I can search for query and you see custom posts query. I'll click on that. It will copy the query to clipboard, and then I can delete the object that I already have and paste my new object. Then I'll just go ahead and make some changes. So for example, I want to change the post type. Right now it's only targeting the post and page. I can change it to target something like my own post type, which is called book reviews. I can always get the slug by going over to my post type. So I'll go over to post type, which is under MetaBox, because I use MetaBox to create my post type. And I'll go to the book reviews and I'll just choose the slug, which is book-reviews. And that's what I'll paste in there. The next thing is the status published, the number of posts per page. I want it to return only 3. So I'll say 3. So one thing you should notice is if it's a string, we use quotation marks. If it's an integer or a number, we don't put quotation mark. We just put the number directly. If it's a variable we're trying to access, maybe from another variable, we put quotation marks and 2 curly brackets. So those are the things you just need to remember. So now we're saying order by, okay, title, and the order is in ascending order. So if you just read all of these, it's easy to understand, and you can also just go to the WordPress WP query documentation. It will help you to describe everything that we're using. So right now, we can search for the posts per page, and it will give you what it means and what kind of value it requires. In this case, integer, when it requires a string, when it requires an array, and things like that. So you can only just refer to the documentation. So those are the important information. So the way it is structured is, first we have the post query, which is our root query that we're trying to access as a function. Then within that root query, we have some parameter, which is in the regular brackets. Within the parameter, we have some arguments. The arguments have some key value pairs of different items. And then after our parameter, we now have another curly bracket that now tells us what do we want to return. For most functions, it's like that. It starts with the name of the function, which is post query. Then in brackets, we put in the arguments or whatever the parameters that are affecting that function. And then after those regular brackets, we now put curly brackets to determine what are the actual values we want to return from the function. You can now go ahead and just say get data. And you see it's returning all of the data we need from the posts. It gives you the ID, the post title, post excerpt, and any information that we need. The other thing we might want to do now is to now reduce the information, because that's one beauty about the GraphQL used by Builderius, that we can decide to get only the information we need. So for example, in this case, all we need, let me go ahead and just reduce the bar. All we need is featured image, we need the post title, and we need the book author, which is actually a meta field from MetaBox. So just 3 items. We don't need all the rest of the other items. So we can go back. Let me go ahead and expand it. We need maybe the ID, the post title. I don't need the post excerpt, so I can delete that. I don't need the date, I can delete that. And the featured image. And finally, we need the MetaBox field. So the MetaBox field, I'll just write MetaBox. And you can see different options for MetaBox. It always has autocomplete, so you can always know what to write. There is a small bug right now. It adds option name, which is for option pages. But right now, we're not in an options page. We're just trying to return value from a CPT. So you have to delete that options page, which is why it has an underline for the option name. Delete that. So the field ID, I'm trying to get the book author. So let me go over to MetaBox and just search for custom fields. So I'm looking for custom fields from MetaBox. And it's called the book reviews field group. The exact field I'm looking for is the book author. So let's copy that ID. And that's the field ID we'll now replace here. Within the field ID, put in quotation mark because it's a string, and then we'll put the actual ID, which is book_author. And then I'll say get data. And I see I'm getting the data I need: ID, post title, featured image, and my MetaBox value for my book author. So that's all we need. If you now look down, you see pagination. In this case, for the related posts, we don't really need any pagination. So I can go ahead and delete that whole section for pagination. And that's it. So we have our bracket that's returning all of the values we need, and everything is okay. There are no red underlines, so that means everything is good. The final thing that we may need to do is rename some of these objects, because right now they have some names that are not nice. We can now give them nice aliases. To give them an alias, you just write before the return values. You can say maybe the ID. You want to change the name of the ID to maybe post_ID, something like that. You can change it, but I don't need that here. The title, I can say I want it to be called title. It's an easier name. Then maybe this MetaBox field, I want it to have a better name like book_author. So it is the alias, colon, and then the function. So that function name will now be replaced by the alias. So if I go ahead and get data, you can now see that it has changed. Now it's called title instead of post_title. It's called book author instead of MetaBox something. I may also want to rename the post query to something nicer like reviews, and the posts to something like items. Get data, and we can see the data is now something nicer. We can now use this data in our loop. So I'll come to the loop, make sure I go to the collection element itself, and then I'll delete the initial value. Everything will go blank, but don't worry, just click on the dynamic tag and search for your reviews, and it's the items. And now we get our items because we said we wanted only 3 items. That's why it's returning only 3 items. We can now start replacing these static values with the dynamic data values. So I'll say the anchor, delete post title, replace it with items from the loop. So the first item I want is the title. I get my title. Then the next one is the book author. I'll replace it with dynamic tag author, the name I gave it, which is the nice name. We get the book author, and finally the image. Replace the URL, put the dynamic tag, and I'll get the featured image file URL, and we get our items. In this first example, what we're doing is that we're displaying 3 posts from the book reviews CPT, but it has no relation to the current post. So now let's go ahead and see how we can now display a list of posts that are related to the current post. So we'll go back into our dynamic data and can go ahead and delete the current option. Then we'll go back to our snippets, and this time we'll search for related. So related posts, I've copied it. Then I'll paste the new snippet, and we just change the values like we did previously. So the taxonomy in this case is going to be called genre. That is for my MetaBox taxonomy. Then we'll go ahead and scroll down. The next thing is the post type. The post type should be called book-reviews. Then the post per page is just 3. We don't need to change any other thing apart from the taxonomy again. So that will be genre. And I believe that's it. So let's go ahead and get data. And see we're getting some new set of data, but it's returning too much information. All we need really is post title. Then we need maybe the featured image, the book author, and we can also get the permalink. So we'll delete the options we don't need. We don't need the date and the excerpt. The pagination, we don't need that as well. So I'll delete everything. And make sure there are no errors. Doesn't look like there are any errors. So now we have the ID, the title, I'll call it title, column. The featured image is going to be called featured image. And I'm just looking for the URL. Everything has autocomplete, so it's easy for me to type. Then we need the one from MetaBox, which I said we're going to give it an alias of book_author, column. Then I'm going to say MetaBox value. Then the MetaBox name is book_author. Now delete the option name. So those are the important things we need. I'll do get data. And see we're getting the data we need in the right order. Like we did in the first one, we can go ahead and rename some of these items to make them more user-friendly. But I think it's okay. Let me go ahead and close the dynamic data. Since we've done some changes to the data, we need to now pass in the correct information. So I'll go back to my UL, which is my collection element, delete the variable we had before, and search for the new one, which is related by category. And we get back our data. Like I said, we only have 2 items. If you go to the dynamic data, there are only 2 items being pulled back as related to the current post. And yeah, that's it. That's how easy it is to get our related posts based on the taxonomy. I hope if you enjoyed this video, if you want to get more in-depth knowledge, then check out my next video.